Okay, so imagine this, a meme coin, right? But one that doesn't just, rely on pure hype. Imagine it actually drops real Bitcoin into your wallet just for holding it.
Hmm.
Sounds a bit wild, maybe too good to be true. Well, let's dive in.
Let's do it.
We're taking a deep look today at something called Bitcoin Universal Income. Income, tickers BUI. It's this interesting project popping up on Solana with exactly that kind of promise.
Yeah, and what's really helpful for this deep dive is the range of info we've got. It's not just one thing. We have some quick answers, some really detailed explanations, even a glossary to define terms.
Right.
It gives us a pretty solid base to understand, not just the mechanics, the how, but also the thinking behind it all.
Absolutely. So our mission today really is to get our heads around what BUI actually is, how it pulls off these Bitcoin rewards, and maybe why this whole idea is catching people's attention right now, especially with, everything going on economically. Think of this as like your fast track to getting up to speed on what could be a genuinely novel thing in crypto.
Yeah.
Okay, so the core promise, Bitcoin rewards. How on earth does BUI make that happen?
Well, the main mechanism is actually quite direct. BUI has a 5% transaction tax built right into its smart contract.
Okay, so every buy, every sell gets hit with this 5%.
Exactly, yeah. A small slice from every transaction. And this tax, it doesn't just disappear into the ether. It's specifically used to buy and accumulate wrapped Bitcoin WBTC.
Right, wrapped Bitcoin.
And then this pool of WBTC gets distributed periodically as rewards to people holding the BUI token.
So these aren't just like IOUs or some other token. It's actual Bitcoin, just wrapped for Solana.
Precisely. It's crucial to understand WBTC is Bitcoin, just tokenized to work on the Solana network. It maintains a one-to-one value with Bitcoin. So yeah, these are real Bitcoin rewards, which is, quite different from many meme coins that might reward you in stable coins or their own inflationary token.
Okay, WBTC Bitcoin, but living on Solana. Makes sense. Now, these rewards, these Bitcoin airdrops, how often do they happen? Is it like clockwork or?
It's not a fixed schedule. The team has sort of indicated they prefer doing less frequent but significantly larger airdrops of the WBTC.
Interesting.
They seem to be looking at things like the overall transaction volume to figure out the best timing.
Okay, so they're choosing impact over frequency. Why go that route? Wouldn't like constant little rewards keep people more hooked?
That's a fair point. But the rationale seems to be that these bigger, less frequent drops create more substantial reward moments.
Oh, okay.
It builds up a bit more anticipation, maybe generates more excitement when it finally hits. And frankly, that probably creates better marketing buzz, too, a bigger event to talk about.
Right.
They've sort of contrasted this with other projects, like ATM was mentioned, that do lots of small, frequent payouts. They feel the larger drops have a bigger psychological punch and, marketing leverage.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. Creates a bit of an event. So back to that 5% tax for a sec. It sounds like it's doing double duty funding the rewards, yes, but also maybe shaping how people trade BUI itself.
Exactly. That 5% tax inherently adds friction, right? It acts as a cost barrier for really rapid, high-frequency trading.
Makes sense.
If you're constantly flipping it, buying and selling, those 5% fees are going to eat into your potential profits pretty quickly. So it naturally encourages people to, hold on to their BUI for longer periods to actually benefit from those Bitcoin reward distributions. The cost of jumping in and out becomes less appealing compared to just holding and waiting for the WBTC.
So it discourages the quick flips.
It discourages the quick flips, yeah, and steers things towards building a community of longer-term holders who are actually incentivized by the Bitcoin rewards, not just the potential for a fast price jump.
Okay, that lines up with wanting longevity. Now, how are they actually getting the word out and building this community? I saw a mention of something called the WOP platform.
Yeah, WOP. That's their shot at what they're terming grassroots marketing. It's basically a system where users get rewarded for sharing or reposting BUI content.
How does that work?
Apparently, the rewards are based on the number of views those reposts get. So it's trying to, gamify promotion and incentivize the community members themselves to become active marketers.
Clever. Using the community's own reach. What about the bigger players, though? The influencers, key opinion leaders, KOLs. How are they handling them?
That's another area where their strategy is a bit distinct. They've apparently made a very conscious decision to pay KOLs in cash, fiat currency, not in BUI tokens.
Cash, really. That's
Yeah.
definitely not the standard playbook in crypto, is it?
Yeah.
Why cash instead of token equity?
Well, the reasoning they've put forward is twofold, primarily. First, it avoids diluting the token supply. Giving away large chunks of tokens to KOLs can hurt the value for existing holders.
Right, inflation.
And second, they believe it helps ensure the endorsements are more, well, genuine. If a KOL is paid cash up front, the thinking goes, their motivation to promote it hopefully comes from actually believing in the project, not just needing to pump the price of tokens they were given.
Okay, aiming for authenticity. Less shilling just to dump tokens later.
Exactly. They're trying to align incentives better. And they're also using things like animated videos in their marketing mix, presumably to make the concepts easier to grasp and maybe a bit more entertaining.
Okay, so it sounds like they're thinking about how to keep this going, about sustainability. How does that 5% tax fit into the project's own operational health?
Well, it's not all going to the WBTC reward pool. A portion of that 5% tax is also allocated to support the core project team.
Funding operations?
Yeah, covering costs like ongoing development, the marketing efforts we just discussed, server costs, general operations, that kind of thing. It creates a kind of self-sustaining economic engine for the project itself.
So they're less reliant on, say, selling off team tokens or needing constant external funding.
That seems to be the goal, yeah. To build a model that can support itself through its own activity.
Makes sense. And what are they aiming for initially? Any early targets mentioned?
The number that came up in the source material was an initial market cap goal of $1 million.
Okay, $1 million.
Yeah, presented as a sort of foundational milestone, something to show they've got initial traction, built a base, before aiming for, much bigger things down the line.
Got it. A first stepping stone. Okay, let's zoom out a bit. Why all this interest in meme coins generally, especially ones promising these kinds of returns? What's the bigger context here?
Well, if you connect it to the broader economic picture, the material we reviewed points towards some pretty common anxieties right now. Things like inflation eating away at savings.
Definitely feeling that.
Worries about potential recession or economic slowdowns, and just a general sort of unease about leverage in the traditional financial system. There's even, skepticism expressed about the long-term stability of things typically seen as safe, like the US dollar or government bonds.
So people are nervous about the traditional system looking elsewhere.
That's the backdrop, yeah. And in that environment, Bitcoin often gets discussed as a potential alternative store of value, a hedge against that instability because of its fixed supply.
The digital gold narrative.
Right. And at the same time, you see this pull towards high-risk, high-potential return assets like meme coins. For some people, maybe those feeling left behind by traditional finance or just seeking outsized returns, these seem like attractive, albeit risky bets.
So BUI is trying to play in that space, appealing to both the Bitcoin believers and the meme coin crowd, kind of bridging the gap.
That seems to be the positioning, yes. Trying to capture interest from both camps. Those drawn to the, let's say, fast-paced culture of meme coins, and those more fundamentally interested in Bitcoin's potential as a long-term asset.
It's an interesting tightrope to walk.
It is. And it also seems like the team behind BUIs is consciously trying to learn from mistakes made by other projects in the past.
Oh, what kind of lessons are we talking about? What are they trying to avoid doing wrong?
Well, the sources specifically call out the risks associated with giving KOLs large amounts of token equity.
Back to the KOL payments.
Yeah. Past experiences have shown that can sometimes lead to manipulation or KOLs dumping their tokens quickly, which can really damage trust and hurt the community.
The classic rug pull scenario, or close to it.
Exactly. So BuddyUI's approach seems to emphasize more transparency, trying to align the team's incentives with the communities, and building partnerships that are based on, ideally, genuine belief, not just a quick payday.
Trying to build something more solid.
Trying to build systems that reward real participation and holding rather than manipulation. Avoiding those situations that lead to broken trust is clearly a focus.
That definitely sounds like a more mature way to approach a meme coin project.
Yeah.
And that core mechanism, the Solana tax funding Bitcoin rewards, that's really the hook, isn't it?
It absolutely is. That direct conversion, taking the energy and transaction volume from a Solana token and turning it directly into WBTC, into Bitcoin rewards, that's the unique selling proposition. It really could potentially attract a wider range of people than a typical meme coin. You might get the Solana folks interested in yield, and you might get Bitcoin enthusiasts interested in earning more Bitcoin.
Right, appealing across ecosystems almost.
And the fact that the reward is WBTC actual Bitcoin, not just another token or a stable coin, that's a key differentiator. It feels more tangible, more connected to the established crypto bedrock.
Okay, let's try and pull this all together then. We've dug pretty deep into BUI. What are the main takeaways for you as we wrap this segment up?
I think the key things that stand out are, first, the really novel reward system using that transaction tax to directly distribute Bitcoin. Second, their marketing approach, focusing on grassroots stuff like WOP and being deliberate about KOL payments. Third, how they're positioning this within the current, slightly anxious economic climate. And fourth, this stated intention to learn from past crypto mistakes, focusing on transparency and alignment.
Okay, so we kicked off asking if a meme coin paying you in Bitcoin sounds too good to be true. Having gone through the mechanics and the strategy, what's your final thought on that initial question?
Well, it leads to a really important point for you, the listener, to weigh up, I think. The mechanics, as described, are there. The strategy seems thought out based on the info we have, but
There's always a but in crypto.
there often is. The reality is that crypto, especially the meme coin corner of it, is inherently volatile and carries significant risk. Whether BUI succeeds in the long run will depend hugely on execution, on building and maintaining that community trust, and, of course, on how the wider market behaves. The model is interesting, but success isn't guaranteed.
Definitely food for thought. Okay, so here's maybe one last thing for you to chew on.
Yeah.
Could this model, this BUI approach, actually signal a shift, maybe an evolution, in what meme coins can be, moving beyond just hype cycles to offer something more, well, tangible connected to Bitcoin? What might the ripples be if this kind of tax-to-Bitcoin reward system started to catch on? Maybe not just on Solana, but elsewhere too. It definitely leaves you with something interesting to consider about the future of this space.
Absolutely. And for anyone whose interest is piqued, digging deeper into the Solana ecosystem itself, or just tracking the broader trends in how meme coins are trying to build utility and community finance, that seems like a worthwhile next step.